What happens when a man who has everything decides he's entitled to even more? We're talking about Richard Sterling, the tech mogul billionaire, a man who graced the covers of Forbes and Fortune. He thought his divorce would be a simple transaction, a footnote in his legendary career. That's why he had the audacity to walk into the Supreme Court, not just with his high-powered legal team, but with his much younger mistress, Sienna, clinging to his arm. He smirked at his wife of 20 years, Penelope expecting her to crumble. But he made one catastrophic miscalculation. He forgot who he was dealing with. What the judge revealed next wasn't just a legal bombshell. It was an explosion that vaporized an empire and exposed a lie 2 decades in the making. The sterile wood-paneled courtroom buzzed with the low hum of anticipation. It wasn't just another high-asset divorce. It was a public execution, or so Richard Sterling intended. He made his entrance as if walking onto a red carpet, dressed in a bespoke Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than the average car. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed, and a Patek Philippe watch gleamed on his wrist as he waved away a throng of reporters. But the real spectacle was the woman on his arm. Sienna Carmichael, a 25-year-old Instagram model with eyes as blue and vacant as a chlorinated pool, was poured into a crimson dress that left little to the imagination. She held Richard's hand possessively, her diamond bracelet, a recent gift, catching the harsh courthouse lighting and scattering it like shrapnel. They were a portrait of audacious disrespect, a living, breathing insult to the woman sitting alone on the opposite bench. That woman was Penelope Hayes. At 48, Penelope looked to the untrained eye like a woman faded by time and quiet suburban life. Her charcoal grey suit was tasteful but not flashy. Her brown hair was pulled back into a simple, elegant chignon. She wore no ostentatious jewelry, only the thin gold wedding band that now felt like a shackle. She sat with a ramrod-straight posture, her hands folded calmly in her lap. To Richard, she was a relic of his past, the starter wife who had served her purpose and was now an obstacle to his new life. He looked at her and felt a flicker of pity quickly extinguished by annoyance. This whole process was a tedious waste of his valuable time. His lawyer, Alistair Finch, a shark in a Savile Row suit, leaned in. "It's all in hand, Richard. We've offered her a generous settlement, 20 million the Hamptons house, and an annuity. Far more than she's entitled to. She has no claim on Sterling Innovations. The company is yours, built by your genius. The judge will see that. Her refusal to accept is just greed." Richard nodded his gaze, flicking dismissively towards Penelope. $20 million is a rounding error for me, Alistair, but it's the principle. She didn't build a single thing. She planned dinner parties and redecorated the houses I paid for. She should be grateful. He caught Penelope's eye across the courtroom. He expected to see fear, sadness, perhaps desperation. Instead, he saw nothing. A calm, placid lake. It was unnerving. He had always been able to read her, to manipulate her quiet nature. But this version of Penelope was a stranger. His mistress Sienna squeezed his hand. "Don't let her bother you, baby." She whispered, her voice loud enough for the first few rows to hear. "Soon this will all be over, and we can finally be together properly. Just think of the yacht in Monaco." Richard gave her a reassuring smile, the one he reserved for magazine photographers. He felt powerful, invincible. He was Richard Sterling, the visionary behind Sterling Innovations, a tech behemoth worth an estimated $12 billion. He had started with nothing but an idea and raw ambition. Penelope had been there, yes, a supportive partner in the early lean years. But support didn't equate to equity. Love didn't translate to stock options. On the other side of the aisle, Penelope's lawyer, Ava Chen, a sharp-witted woman with an unassuming demeanor and a mind like a steel trap, placed a hand on her client's shoulder. "Are you ready, Penelope?" Penelope took a slow, deep breath and finally looked away from her husband. "I've been ready for a long time, Ava," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Let's begin." The bailiff's voice boomed. "All rise. The Honorable Judge Evelyn Davies presiding." A stern, intelligent-looking woman in her late 60s took the bench. Judge Davies had a reputation for being meticulous fair and utterly immune to the theatrics of wealth and power. Her eyes scanned the room, lingering for a moment on Richard and Sienna, a flicker of something unreadable in her expression, before settling on the documents before her. "We are here today to hear the divorce proceedings of Sterling versus Hayes." Judge Davies began, her voice cutting through the tension. "Mr. Finch, you may begin." Alistair Finch stood up, radiating confidence. He launched into a grand narrative of Richard Sterling, the self-made titan of industry. He painted a picture of a man who worked 100-hour weeks, who risked everything on a dream, while his wife enjoyed the fruits of his labor. He presented Penelope as a traditional homemaker who, while appreciated for her domestic contributions, had no role, no input, and no legal claim on the colossal enterprise that was Sterling Innovations. "Your Honor," Finch concluded with a flourish, "Mr. Sterling, in his immense generosity, has made an offer that far exceeds the legal requirement for a spouse in her position. We ask the court to validate this settlement and finalize this dissolution so both parties can move on." Judge Davies listened patiently, her face impassive. When Finch sat down, she turned her gaze to the other table. "Ms. Chen, your response—" Ava Chen rose. She was the antithesis of Finch. No grand gestures, no booming rhetoric. She spoke with a quiet, lethal precision. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "we reject Mr. Sterling's generous offer. We reject it not because it is insufficient, but because it is based on a fundamentally false premise." A murmur went through the courtroom. Richard shifted in his seat, a frown creasing his brow. Finch jumped to his feet. "Objection. Ms. Chen is casting aspersions. The premise is fact. Mr. Sterling founded and built Sterling Innovations." "Is it a fact, Mr. Finch?" Ava Chen asked, turning her head slightly. "Or is it just a very well-told story?" Judge Davies held up a hand. "I'll allow it. Proceed, Ms. Chen. But be warned, your argument had better be grounded in evidence." "Thank you, Your Honor," Ava said. "It is. The evidence we will present today will prove that my client Penelope Hayes is not entitled to half of Sterling Innovations." Richard smirked, leaning back in his chair. He exchanged a triumphant glance with Sienna. He knew it. Penelope's lawyer was admitting defeat. Ava Chen paused for a beat, letting the silence hang in the air before delivering the blow. "My client is not entitled to half of the company." She repeated, her voice ringing with clarity. "Because she already owns all of it." The courtroom erupted 22 years earlier, 2003. The story Richard Sterling told himself and the world began in a dusty garage in Palo Alto. The reality began in a small, cramped apartment in a less fashionable part of town, with peeling paint and a window that overlooked a brick wall. Richard was a bartender back then, brimming with charisma and grand ideas, but lacking the discipline or the capital to make them reality. He was handsome, charming, and could talk his way into or out of anything. He dreamt of being a tech visionary, like Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, But his days were spent pouring drinks, and his nights were spent sketching out half-baked business plans on cocktail napkins. He met Penelope Hayes at a university library. She wasn't a student there. She was a freelance coder and data analyst, a ghost in the machine for several burgeoning tech startups. She was brilliant, but intensely private. While Richard was a firework, all noise and bright light, Penelope was a deep, quiet river. She had a mind that saw patterns and possibilities where others saw only chaos. She had come from a family of academics, people who valued intellect over attention. They fell in love quickly. He was drawn to her quiet strength and her sharp mind, which he found exotic. She was drawn to his boundless energy and his unshakable belief in himself, a confidence she had always lacked. One evening over cheap takeout Chinese food, Richard was passionately explaining his latest idea, a software platform that could streamline supply chain logistics for small businesses. It was a good idea, but it was just that, an idea. He had no code, no model, no capital. Penelope listened patiently, then walked over to her beaten-up desktop computer. "The core problem isn't just streamlining," she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "It's predictive analysis. You need a system that doesn't just track inventory, but predicts demand based on dozens of variables, market trends, weather patterns, social media sentiment. That's the real value." Over the next 6 months, while Richard continued to work at the bar, Penelope dedicated herself to building the foundation of that system. She wrote the core algorithm, a piece of code so elegant and powerful it was years ahead of its time. She worked late into the night, fueled by coffee and a silent, burning ambition of her own. She called the project Nexus. The problem, as always, was money. They needed servers, patents, a small office, and at least one other programmer. They were flat broke. "We could try to find venture capitalists," Richard suggested, frustrated. "But they'll want 80% of the company before we've even started." That's when Penelope revealed her secret. "My parents," she began hesitantly. "They weren't wealthy, but they were very careful. They left me a trust fund when they passed away. It's managed by Morgan Stanley." Richard's eyes widened. "A trust fund, Penny? Why didn't you tell me how much?" "It's significant," she said. "Around $2 million. But there are conditions. My father was very protective. The trust was structured so that the capital could only be used for a business venture where I was the sole proprietor. He didn't trust anyone else with my future." Richard's face fell. His dream right there, but locked behind a door he couldn't open. Sole proprietor, so. "I'm out." Penelope looked at him, at the man she loved, whose ambition she wanted to nurture. She saw his charisma, his ability to sell a vision, to be the face of an enterprise in a way she never could be. She hated public speaking, hated networking. He thrived on it. They were two halves of a whole. She had a plan that was both a loving sacrifice and a masterfully strategic move. "No," she said softly. "Not out. We form the company, a Delaware C Corp, legally on all the incorporation documents filed with the state. I will be listed as the 100% shareholder funded directly from the trust as per its bylaws. This satisfies the legal requirement of the trust." She paused, taking his hands. "But publicly, Richard, it will be your company. We'll call it Sterling Innovations. You will be the CEO, the president, the chairman. You will be the face and the voice. We'll draw up a private internal agreement just between us. It will state that you are the acting CEO, granted a generous salary and a significant performance-based bonus structure tied to the company's growth. We'll even call your bonus profit sharing, so you feel like an owner. But the equity, the actual ownership, that has to remain with me to unlock the funds. Richard was hesitant. So I'd be an employee. Your employee. The word tasted like ash in his mouth. You'd be the leader, she corrected gently. The visionary. No one ever has to know about the legal structure. This is just paperwork to satisfy my father's lawyers. In the real world, in the press to our future employees, you are the founder. I'll stay in the background as chief technology officer, maybe. I prefer the work anyway, not the spotlight. It's the only way, Richard. It's our only path. Blinded by the sudden proximity of $2 million and the promise of his name in lights, Richard agreed. He saw it as a temporary legal hurdle, a formality. In his mind, his vision and her money were merging. Over time, that distinction would blur until it vanished completely. They signed 2 sets of documents that week. The first were the public-facing incorporation papers for Sterling Innovations, which listed Richard Sterling as CEO and president. The second was a deeply confidential ironclad private agreement drafted by the trust's attorneys. It explicitly stated Penelope Hayes was the sole capital contributor and 100% owner of all shares, and that Richard Sterling was an employee at will, granted the title of CEO. It was notarized and filed away in a safe deposit box at a bank managed by the trust. And so Sterling Innovations was born. Fueled by Penelope's capital and built on the foundation of her code, but with Richard Sterling's name on the door. He was a brilliant salesman, and he sold the story of the self-made man to the world, and eventually even to himself. The first 10 years were a whirlwind of success. Richard, freed from financial constraints and powered by Penelope's revolutionary software, was unstoppable. He was a master at networking, at wooing investors for secondary rounds of funding, all of which were legally structured as debt financing or non-voting shares to avoid diluting Penelope's sole ownership, and at building a cult of personality around himself. He was the charismatic genius on the cover of magazines. Penelope, meanwhile, willingly took a back seat. She led the tech development team, working quietly and diligently out of the spotlight. She was listed on the company website as head of R&D. Most employees saw her as the quiet, slightly awkward wife of the brilliant boss. They had no idea that the entire infrastructure they worked on was the product of her mind. When they married 2 years after founding the company, she took his last name for social purposes, but legally remained Penelope Hayes on all her financial and corporate documents, a detail Richard found sentimental and never questioned. Their marriage was for a time a partnership. He was the rocket fuel, she was the guidance system. But as the company's valuation soared from millions to billions, the balance of power in their relationship began to shift, at least in Richard's mind. He started to believe his own press. He forgot the cramped apartment, the trust fund, the private agreement. He remembered only his speeches, his deals, his triumphs. He saw Penelope not as his partner, but as part of his domestic support system. The woman who ran their sprawling Atherton mansion, who raised their 2 children, who organized the charity galas that burnished his public image. Her role as head of R&D became more of an honorary title in his eyes. He promoted others above her men who were good at corporate politics, and slowly she retreated further from the day-to-day operations, focusing on long-term strategy and new tech incubation from her home office. A gilded kin he had built for her. The first major crack appeared 5 years ago. Richard, drunk on power and adulation, began to change. He became dismissive, arrogant, and cruel in small ways. He'd mock her ideas in front of others, calling them quaint. He traveled constantly, his explanations for his whereabouts becoming vague. Then came Sienna Carmichael. Penelope discovered the affair not through a stray text message or a lipstick stain, but through a corporate expense report. She still had top-level access to the company's financials, a privilege Richard had forgotten or deemed unimportant. She saw a charge for a $50,000 diamond bracelet from Harry Winston, coded under client entertainment. A few clicks later, she saw charges for suites at the Four Seasons in Paris, private jet charters to St. Bart's, a lease on a penthouse apartment on Park Avenue, all billed to Sterling Innovations, all for a client named Sienna Carmichael. There was a moment of profound, soul-crushing pain. The betrayal was absolute. But Penelope did not cry. She did not scream. The quiet river of her personality froze over into a sheet of ice. The years of being underestimated, of being slowly erased from her own story, had forged a core of steel within her. She didn't confront him. A confrontation would have been emotional, messy, and ultimately pointless. He would lie, charm his way out of it, and paint her as a hysterical, jealous wife. Instead, she acted. She made a phone call, not to a marriage counselor, but to the top marital and corporate litigator in the state, Ava Chen. In a quiet, discreet office overlooking the San Francisco Bay, Penelope laid out the entire story. She told Ava about the early days, the trust fund, the algorithm, she wrote. And then she produced her trump card, a certified copy of the private ownership agreement retrieved from the bank's safe deposit box, where it had sat dormant for 2 decades. Ava Chen read the document, her expression shifting from professional interest to utter astonishment. She looked up at the quiet, dignified woman sitting opposite her. She wasn't just looking at a wronged wife. She was looking at the sole, undisputed owner of a multi-billion-dollar corporation who had been living as a ghost in her own machine. He's been using corporate funds to finance his affair. Penelope stated, her voice devoid of emotion. He's diluted the company's value with his recklessness and his ego. This document is ironclad, Penelope. Ava said, her mind already racing through the legal possibilities. The terms of the trust, the source of the capital, the notarized signatures. There is no ambiguity here. You own Sterling Innovations, all of it. I know, Penelope replied. When he asked for a divorce a month ago, he told me he would be fair. He offered to let me keep the house he thought he paid for. A humorless smile touched her lips. I think it's time we corrected the narrative. The strategy was set. They would let Richard file first. They would let him and his shark, Alistair Finch, lay out their entire case based on the public story. They would let him walk into court with his mistress on his arm, the pinnacle of his hubris. They would give him all the rope he needed, and then, with one simple, undeniable document, they would let him hang himself. For the next 6 months, Penelope played the part of the broken, defeated wife. She was quiet, acquiescent. She moved into the guest wing of the mansion. Richard saw it as her slow acceptance of the inevitable. He had no idea he was a king, living on borrowed time in a castle that had never been his. Back in the courtroom, the shockwave from Ava Chen's declaration, "My client already owns all of it," had subsided into a tense, disbelieving silence. Alistair Finch was on his feet, his face flushed with anger. Your Honor, this is outrageous. It's a desperate theatrical ploy. We have 2 decades of public records, tax filings, EC documents that list Mr. Sterling as the chairman and primary stakeholder. Is Ms. Chen suggesting these are all fraudulent, not fraudulent, Mr. Finch? Ava replied calmly. Just incomplete. They tell a story, but not the whole story. With the court's permission, I'd like to call Mr. Richard Sterling to the stand. Judge Davies nodded. Mr. Sterling, please approach. Richard walked to the witness stand, a look of profound irritation on his face. This was a circus. He shot a venomous glare at Penelope, who met his gaze without flinching. Ava Chen approached the stand. Mr. Sterling, thank you for your time. Let's start at the beginning. You are credited as the founder of Sterling Innovations. Is that correct? That is correct, Richard said, his voice booming with authority. And you founded it in 2003 out of your garage with nothing but an idea and a dream. Yes, it's a well-documented story. Indeed, Ava said, picking up a file. Let's talk about the initial capitalization. A dream is wonderful, Mr. Sterling, but a company requires capital. Where did the initial seed money come from? Richard hesitated for a fraction of a second. I secured private funding from personal savings and family loans. Family loans, Ava pressed. Could you specify which family members your parents were of modest means? And you were a bartender at the time, correct? I had savings, he snapped. This was over 20 years ago. I don't recall the exact details. Let me help you, Ava said, her voice turning sharp. Isn't it true that the initial capital infusion into the corporate account for Sterling Innovations on May 12, 2003, was a single wire transfer in the amount of $2 million? Richard's eyes narrowed. That sounds approximately correct. And isn't it true, Ava continued, walking towards the clerk, that this wire transfer did not come from your personal account or from any of your family members, but rather from a trust account managed by Morgan Stanley, an account held in the name of one Penelope Hayes? She handed a document to the clerk. Your Honor, I submit as Exhibit A a certified statement from Morgan Stanley detailing the 2003 transfer. Judge Davies examined the document. Alistair Finch rushed over to look at it, his face paling slightly. This money was a gift, Richard stammered from the stand. A gift from my then-girlfriend to help start my company. She believed in me. A gift, Ava mused. A $2 million gift with no paperwork. That seems unlikely. But let's move on. Let's talk about the core product. The Nexus logistics algorithm that was the foundation of the company's success. You've often referred to it as your brainchild. I conceived of the platform, Richard said defensively. I set the vision. But you didn't write the code, did you, Mr. Sterling? You have no programming background. I had a team. And who led that team? Who wrote the initial 70,000 lines of code for the base algorithm? Ava asked. Richard fell silent. He glanced at Penelope, who was watching the exchange with the quiet intensity of a hawk. You don't know, do you? Ava pressed. The person who wrote that code was Penelope Hayes. She worked for 18 hours a day for 6 months in your tiny apartment to build the very engine of the company you call yours. Objection, Finch shouted. Relevance. This is ancient history. It is the most relevant history there is. Your Honor, Judge Davies said, her eyes fixed on Richard. Objection overruled. Answer the question, Mr. Sterling. Penelope. She handled the technical side. Richard mumbled, his voice losing its confident timbre. That was her role. Her role, Ava repeated. And what was your role exactly besides setting the vision? I was the CEO. I built the business. I made the deals, hired the people. I put us on the map. He boomed, his frustration boiling over. That company is worth $12 billion because of me. So you believe you are entitled to the fruits of that success? Absolutely 100%. Thank you, Mr. Sterling, Ava said softly. You've been very clear. She walked back to her table as Richard, fuming, stepped down from the stand. He thought he had weathered the storm. He thought it was just a pathetic attempt to embarrass him. He sat down next to Sienna and took her hand, trying to project an aura of calm control. He was still the king. Ava Chen stood and addressed the judge. Your Honor, Mr. Sterling's testimony has been illuminating. He believes the company is his because he was the public face, the deal-maker. He has conveniently forgotten who provided the seed capital and the foundational technology. But feelings and public narratives are not what matters in this court. Legally binding agreements are. She picked up a single leather-bound document from her table. Mr. Sterling mentioned that Penelope's $2 million was a gift. That is false. It was an investment from her family trust, an investment that came with strict, non-negotiable conditions. The primary condition was that Penelope Hayes must be the sole legal proprietor of any venture funded by it. Alistair Finch laughed out loud, a short, sharp, disbelieving bark. This is absurd. If such a thing were true, there would be a document. And after 20 years of SEC filings and audits, such a document would have surfaced. It does not exist. Ava Chen looked at him, a slight, almost pitying smile on her face. Oh, but it does exist, Mr. Finch, she said. It has simply been waiting for the right moment to be seen. She walked towards the judge's bench, the leather-bound document held in her hand, like a sacred text. Your Honor, I present Exhibit B, the private shareholder and executive employment agreement for Sterling Innovations, dated May 14, 2003, executed by the attorneys of the Hayes Family Trust. The room fell into a deathly silence. Every eye was on that document. Richard Sterling stared at it, his mind refusing to process what was happening. That forgotten piece of paper, that formality from 2 decades ago. It couldn't be. This document, Ava announced, her voice resonating in the still air, was a precondition for the release of the trust funds. It stipulates in clear, unambiguous language that 100% of the founding shares of Sterling Innovations are the sole property of Penelope Hayes. It further stipulates that Mr. Richard Sterling is appointed as Chief Executive Officer, an employee at will for a designated salary and a performance-based bonus package. She handed the document to Judge Davies. It is signed, Your Honor, by Penelope Hayes and by Richard Sterling. The silence in the courtroom was so profound, it felt like a physical weight. All the air had been sucked out of the room. Richard Sterling sat frozen in his chair, his face a mask of chalky disbelief. The bravado, the arrogance, the smug certainty, it all evaporated in an instant, replaced by a raw, primal panic. His eyes were wide, fixed on the document now in Judge Davies's hands, as if it were a venomous snake. Sienna Carmichael beside him finally seemed to grasp the magnitude of what was happening. Her perfectly manicured hand slipped from Richard's arm. The billionaire she had attached herself to was suddenly looking small. Alistair Finch, for the first time in his illustrious career, was utterly speechless. He looked from Ava Chen's calm, triumphant face to his client's crumbling facade. He had been played. He had built his entire case on a foundation of sand, and the tide was now coming in. Judge Davies spent what felt like an eternity examining the document. She read every line, her expression unreadable. She turned the pages slowly, her gaze lingering on the final page with the 2 signatures, side by side, from a different lifetime. One Penelope's was neat and precise. The other, Richard's, was a confident, flamboyant scrawl, the signature of a man who believed he was signing a mere formality on his way to greatness. Finally, she looked up, her eyes sweeping over the courtroom before landing squarely on Richard. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth, "is this your signature?" She had the clerk carry the document over to the defense table. Richard stared at it. He couldn't deny it. It was his. He remembered that day now, a vague, hazy memory of signing a stack of papers in a stuffy lawyer's office. He had been so focused on the $2 million on the future on the name Sterling Innovations that the fine print had seemed irrelevant. Penelope had told him it was just a legal hoop to jump through for her family's trust. He had trusted her, or rather, he hadn't cared enough to distrust her. I signed it," he stammered, his voice a hoarse whisper. But it was a formality, an understanding. The company was always meant to be mine. An understanding does not supersede a legally binding contract. "Mr. Sterling," Judge Davies said sternly, "especially not one drafted by trust attorneys and executed as a condition of a multi-million-dollar investment. This document is not an understanding. It is an instrument of ownership." She turned to Alastair Finch. "Miss Finch, do you have any evidence to refute the validity of this agreement?" Finch, pale and flustered, could only shake his head. "No, Your Honor. We were unaware of this document's existence." The admission was a death knell for his case. Judge Davies leaned forward, her gaze withering. "Then let me be perfectly clear for everyone in this room. The story of the self-made man, Richard Sterling, is a fiction. A compelling fiction, but a fiction nonetheless. The evidence presented today is irrefutable. The seed capital for Sterling Innovations came from a trust belonging solely to Penelope Hayes. The foundational intellectual property was created solely by Penelope Hayes. And the legal ownership of 100% of the company was and has always been vested solely with Penelope Hayes, as stipulated by this contract, signed by Mr. Sterling himself." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Richard looked like he had been physically struck. He turned to look at Penelope. For the first time he saw her, not the faded wife or the quiet homemaker, but the architect of his entire life, the silent queen who had let him play king in her castle. The placid lake he'd looked at earlier was a deep, dark ocean, and he was just now realizing he had been drowning in it for 20 years. Her calm wasn't weakness, it was absolute, unshakable power. "Therefore," Judge Davies continued, her voice rising to a declarative boom, "the court finds the following. Sterling Innovations is not a marital asset to be divided. It is and always has been the sole and separate property of Ms. Penelope Hayes." A collective gasp went through the gallery. Mr. Sterling's claims to ownership of the company are hereby dismissed. As he is legally an employee of the company owned by Ms. Hayes, his position, salary, and any bonuses are subject to her discretion as the sole owner and director. As for the division of actual marital assets, those acquired jointly during the marriage outside of the company, that will be divided according to state law. This includes the primary residence, which records show was purchased with funds from Ms. Hayes's personal accounts and other joint investments. The hammer fell. It wasn't just that he had lost the company. He had lost everything. The houses, the jets, the lavish lifestyle, it was all funded by the company. Her company. He wasn't the billionaire owner. He was the overpaid CEO who had just been exposed in the most public way imaginable. His worth wasn't $12 billion. It was effectively zero. Sienna Carmichael stood up so abruptly, her chair scraped loudly against the floor. Without a word, without a single backward glance at the man whose fortune had just vanished, she turned and walked briskly out of the courtroom, her red dress a retreating flag of surrender. The diamond bracelet on her wrist, purchased with corporate funds, now belonged to the woman she had sneered at. Richard Sterling slumped in his chair, a broken man. The reporters in the gallery were scribbling furiously, their faces alight with the story of a lifetime. The Titan had fallen. Judge Davies banged her gavel. "This court is adjourned." The aftermath was a media firestorm. "The Phantom Billionaire," screamed the cover of the Wall Street Journal. "How the CEO's wife was the secret owner all along," read the headline in the New York Times. Richard Sterling's fall from grace was brutal, public, and absolute. He became a cautionary tale, a punchline in late-night monologues. The man who had it all and flew too close to the sun, only to discover the sun was never his to begin with. Stripped of his corporate credit cards, his chauffeured Maybach, and his access to the private jet, he was adrift. Alistair Finch dropped him as a client the next day. His powerful friends stopped returning his calls. He was a pariah. The final divorce settlement left him with a fraction of what he had expected his personal effects, and a small portion of a joint savings account. It was more money than most people see in a lifetime, but for a man accustomed to billions, it was poverty. The day after the verdict, Penelope Hayes walked through the gleaming glass doors of the Sterling Innovations headquarters in Silicon Valley. She was no longer dressed in the muted tones of a courtroom observer. She wore a sharply tailored power suit in a deep shade of sapphire blue, her hair down her stride, confident and purposeful. The lobby fell silent as she entered. Employees who had only ever seen her as the boss's wife at company picnics now stared in awe and confusion. She didn't pause. She walked directly to the bank of private elevators, used her old R&D keycard, which still granted her top-level access, and ascended to the top floor. She stepped out into the opulent executive suite. The vast corner office, with its panoramic views of the valley, was empty. The personal effects, the framed magazine covers, featuring his face, the photos of him, with world leaders, the gaudy sculptures had already been boxed up and removed. All that remained was the desk. Her desk. She walked over and ran a hand over the smooth, polished wood. For 20 years, she had allowed another person to sit here to take credit for her work, her capital, her creation. It had been a choice born of love, then sustained by strategy. Now it was over. Her first act as the official public owner of the company was to call an all-hands meeting. Standing before the thousands of employees who had believed Richard's story, she didn't gloat or denigrate her ex-husband. She simply told the truth. For 20 years, this company has had a public face and a private engine, she said, her voice clear and steady. Today they become one. My name is Penelope Hayes, and I am the founder and owner of this company. Our work in predictive logistics has changed the world, but our potential is even greater. The era of ego is over. The era of true innovation begins now. She immediately fired the sycophants Richard had promoted and elevated the brilliant engineers and strategists, many of them women, whom he had overlooked. She greenlit projects he had dismissed as too risky. She announced a new company name, shedding the one that was now synonymous with disgrace. Sterling Innovations was dead. From its ashes rose Nexus Analytics, a callback to the original name she had given her algorithm in that tiny apartment all those years ago. The company under her focused and visionary leadership didn't just survive, it thrived. The market, initially spooked, responded with overwhelming confidence to the story of the quiet genius finally taking her rightful place. The stock soared. Penelope Hayes never set out for revenge. She had only wanted what was hers. But in reclaiming her company, she reclaimed her life, her identity, and her story. She was no longer Richard Sterling's wife, a footnote in his biography. She was Penelope Hayes, the woman who built an empire in silence, and then, when the time was right, stepped into the light to claim her throne. 6 months had passed since the gavel fell, shattering one life and forging another. The name Sterling was now a toxic asset, a synonym for hubris and public humiliation. In its place, Nexus Analytics was ascending a testament to the quiet, formidable woman who now rightfully occupied the CEO's chair. The world, it turned out, loved the story of the ghost in the machine emerging to claim her kingdom. The company's valuation had not only stabilized, but had climbed by 15%, as Penelope's steady, no-nonsense leadership reassured a market weary of her ex-husband's erratic showmanship. From her office on the 50th floor, Penelope Hayes looked out over the sprawling Silicon landscape. The panoramic view was the same, but the person looking out was entirely different. The weight of her new role was immense. Her days were no longer spent in the quiet solitude of courtroom and data models, but in a relentless whirlwind of board meetings, investor calls, and strategic planning sessions. She was the public face, now the final authority. The buck in its entirety stopped with her. She had just concluded a tense video conference with her new European operations chief, dissecting supply chain vulnerabilities in the Baltic states. She was good at it. Her mind, so adept at seeing patterns in data, could easily see the flow of global commerce. But it was draining in a way her old work never was. The solitude she once cherished was now a luxury. Her intercom buzzed. It was her assistant. "Ms. Hayes, your son Leo is here to see you." A rare, genuine smile touched Penelope's lips. "Send him in, please." Leo, her 20-year-old son, walked in. He had her thoughtful eyes, but Richard's easy charm, a combination that Penelope found both endearing and slightly painful. He was a junior at Stanford, and his visits were her anchor to a world outside of corporate warfare. "Hey, Mom," he said, slumping into one of the plush chairs opposite her massive desk. "This place still looks like a spaceship." "It's a bit much, isn't it?" she conceded. "I'm thinking of redecorating. Less Bond villain, more functional workspace." They talked for a few minutes about his classes and his plans for the summer, but Penelope could sense a tension in him, a familiar unease that had been present since the divorce. "What is it, Leo?" she finally asked gently. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I saw Dad last week." Penelope's posture stiffened slightly. She made it a point never to speak ill of Richard to their children Leo and his younger sister Clara. She wanted them to form their own opinions, but it was difficult. "How is he?" she asked, her voice neutral. "He's different," Leo said, struggling for the right words. "He's living in a condo in Russian Hill. It's nice, but it's not, you know. He talks a lot. About you. About the past." Leo hesitated, then looked at her directly. "Mom, he says you planned it all from the beginning, that you set him up, let him build everything just so you could take it away. He's telling everyone who will listen that he's the victim." Penelope felt a familiar ache. "Leo, what your father and I had. It was complicated. The ownership agreement was a legal necessity at the start. I never intended for this." "But did you have to humiliate him?" Leo pressed his voice, cracking with a son's pain. In court with the mistress there, in front of the whole world. He has nothing left. He made his choices, Leo. Penelope said, her voice firm, but not unkind. He chose to have an affair. He chose to use company money to fund it. He chose to file for divorce and try to leave me with a pittance of what we built. He chose to walk into that courtroom holding her hand. That wasn't my decision. My only choice was whether to lie down and be erased or to stand up and claim what was legally and morally mine. I chose to stand up for myself and for you and Clara. Leo looked down, conflicted. I know. It's just, he's plotting something, Mom. He's not the kind of man who just fades away. He's met someone, not a woman. Some finance guy, a hedge fund manager named Damien Croft. Dad's been feeding him information about Nexus. Penelope felt a chill run down her spine. Damien Croft. The name was infamous. Croft was a corporate raider, a vulture who specialized in hostile takeovers of vulnerable companies. What kind of information? She asked, her mind instantly shifting into strategic mode. I don't know the details, Leo admitted. Just that Dad thinks he's found a way to get justice. He says you're a tech nerd, not a business leader, and that this Croft fellow is going to expose you and take the company apart. The conversation was cut short by the urgent buzz of her private line. It was Ava Chen. That in itself was a warning sign. Ava didn't call unless it was critical. Penelope, Ava's voice was grim. We have a problem. A big one. Meanwhile, in a sleek, minimalist condominium overlooking Alcatraz, Richard Sterling swirled a glass of expensive whiskey he hadn't paid for. He looked thinner, his face etched with a bitterness that had aged him more than the past 10 years of success ever had. He was a king in exile, and he was consumed by a singular burning purpose vengeance. Across from him sat Damien Croft. Croft was a man in his 40s with cold reptilian eyes and an unnerving stillness. He didn't exude power like Richard once had. He absorbed it from the rooms he entered. He was everything Richard wasn't: patient, meticulous, and utterly devoid of ego. Your ex-wife's rebranding has been surprisingly effective, Croft said, his voice a low monotone. The market likes the narrative. The hidden genius story plays well. It's a fraud, Richard spat. She's a backroom coder who got lucky. She can't handle the pressure of a global enterprise. I know her weaknesses. I built that company's infrastructure. I know where the stress points are. For the past 3 months, Richard had been Croft's oracle. He had detailed every acquisition, every international deal, every piece of corporate debt Richard had taken on during his aggressive expansion phase. He painted a picture of a company stretched thin, a house of cards built by his own daring, now being managed by a timid amateur. Her biggest weakness, Richard continued, leaning forward with a conspiratorial gleam in his eye, is that she despises debt. She's risk-averse. I took on billions in leveraged financing to fund the Asian expansion. She never approved. The covenants on those bonds are complex. If the company's bond rating slips even a single grade, it triggers massive penalty clauses. Pressure it, and the whole thing will start to creak. Croft listened, absorbing every word. My fund has been acquiring that debt quietly for months. He revealed a faint smile, touching his thin lips. We now hold a controlling interest in Nexus Analytics' corporate bonds, over 60% of them. Richard's eyes widened. You do? Yes, Croft said. And tomorrow, we will be making a public tender offer to buy the company. It will be a lowball offer, of course. She will reject it. But the offer itself, combined with our position as her primary creditor, will be enough to spook the ratings agencies. We will issue a statement questioning her leadership and the company's future profitability. When the rating slips, the penalties kick in. The stock will plummet. Then we make our real move. Richard felt a surge of euphoric power he hadn't felt in months. He was back in the game. He was pulling the strings. "She won't see it coming," he whispered, a giddy, vicious smile spreading across his face. Back in her office, Penelope listened on the phone as Ava Chen laid out the grim reality. "Croft Capital just announced a hostile tender offer, Penelope. It's all over the financial news. They're citing leadership uncertainty and long-term strategic risk. It's a classic raid. He's trying to weaponize the very debt Richard saddled the company with." Penelope closed her eyes. Leo's warning echoed in her ears. "He's plotting something, Mum. This wasn't just a corporate maneuver. It was Richard's ghost reaching out from his self-imposed exile to tear down everything she had rightfully claimed. He couldn't own it, so he would see it burned to the ground." She ended the call and stood up, walking back to the vast window. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. She had fought and won the battle for her past. She had corrected the record and reclaimed her name. But now a new war was upon her, a war for the future of her company, her legacy. A flicker of the old fire ignited within her. The anger, the shock, it all coalesced into a familiar, cold resolve. Damien Croft thought she was a tech nerd. Richard thought she was a risk-averse amateur. They saw her as the quiet woman from the courtroom. They had no idea who they were dealing with. She turned back to her desk, her expression now hard as diamond. She pulled up every available piece of data on Croft Capital, on their strategies, their holdings, their past raids. The fight wasn't just in the boardroom anymore. It was here in the data. This was her battlefield. "You want a war, Richard?" she whispered to the empty room. "You have no idea how well I know how to fight one." What a story of poetic justice, a man so blinded by his own ego that he forgot the very foundation he was standing on, was built, paid for, and owned by the woman he cast aside. Penelope Hayes played the long game, proving that true power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet, meticulous work done in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to be revealed. Richard Sterling wanted to erase his wife from his life, but instead the world erased him from the history of his own company. What do you think? Was Penelope's 2-decade-long secret a brilliant strategic move or a tragedy of stolen credit? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever seen such a complete and total reversal of fortune?
Pregnant wife confronts millionaire husband at a hotel bar after catching him with Mistress. A hushed tension filled the opulent bar at the Plaza Hotel, where glittering chandeliers shimmered over velvet seats and polished floors. There, near the gleaming marble counter, stood Anna, her heart thundering, her pregnant belly a silent testament to months of secrets and suspicions. She couldn't tear her eyes away from Daniel, her billionaire husband, who was leaning far too close to a woman in a figure-hugging red dress. A swirl of betrayal and fury surged through Anna's veins, compelling her to take a step forward. Voices in her mind warned her to run, but she couldn't. She had come too far to simply turn back now. Anna Calhoun married Daniel Calhoun 3 years ago in a lavish ceremony that lit up the society pages. Every detail had been meticulously planned, the grand hall decorated with over 100,000 white roses, the custom lace gown from Vera Wang, the multi-tiered cake that shimmered under chandeliers. Their union was celebrated like a fairy tale come to life, but Anna never quite believed in perfect fairy tales. She knew that behind the sparkle of wealth there could be long shadows of ambition, secrecy, and unspoken resentments. Before marrying Daniel, Anna was a small-town girl from Ohio. Her father worked at a local auto parts factory, and her mother taught second-grade children. Anna's ambition was to move to a bustling city, maybe become a journalist or writer, to share stories of courage and transformation. Meeting Daniel was the biggest transformation of her life. He was everything she had ever imagined: tall, charismatic, financially successful beyond reason. His business empire, Calhoun Industries, owned a chain of global tech firms, real estate investments, and even a few luxury brands. By the time Anna met him at an art fundraiser in Manhattan, Daniel had already claimed the title of billionaire and the attention of every socialite in New York. They had a whirlwind romance, exclusive dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants, spontaneous trips to Europe in his private jet, and passionate nights in his penthouse overlooking Central Park. Yet even in those heady days, Anna sometimes felt a rift forming. Daniel was always on his phone, dealing with urgent matters, whispering about investor calls. At first, she attributed it to the demands of high-stakes business. But over time, the phone calls grew more secretive, the late-night meetings more frequent, and the explanations less convincing. When Anna discovered she was pregnant, she was overjoyed. She hoped this would help them both reconnect and step away from the shadows that seemed to linger. But as her belly grew, Daniel seemed more distant than ever. Dinners at home became dinners alone. Business trips multiplied, and the rumors, those echoing whispers of a mistress, began to swirl among the staff of their penthouse. It was a housekeeper's accidental mention that first planted a seed of doubt in Anna's mind. There was talk of Daniel being seen at odd hours with a mysterious woman, a swirl of perfume clinging to his suits at times when he was allegedly just working late. She tried to confront Daniel, gently at first, but he brushed her off, blaming overwork and outside pressures. Anna wasn't satisfied, but she lacked concrete proof. With the pregnancy draining her energy, she buried her doubts, hoping her husband would come to his senses, or that her mind was simply exaggerating from hormones and stress. A love so strong couldn't just vanish, she convinced herself daily. She tried to recall the simple, genuine moments early in their relationship, nights of laughter and comfort, their shared dreams for a happy family. It was enough to keep her afloat, at least for a little while. One evening, Anna was in her study, once her writing nook, now more of a neglected corner, when the phone rang. Daniel had forgotten his personal phone at home. On the caller ID, an unfamiliar name flashed: Tessa. Something in Anna's chest tightened, a primal sense of dread. She answered. A female voice, sultry and self-assured, asked for Daniel. Anna struggled to keep her voice calm. "He's not here right now," Anna said. "May I ask who's calling?" "This is Tessa, his business associate," the woman replied. "We have a meeting scheduled in an hour. Just let him know I'll be waiting at the Golden Vine restaurant. He'll know what it's about." When Anna confronted Daniel about Tessa later, the expression on his face was fleeting, caught between guilt and feigned indifference. He insisted Tessa was just a new consultant he'd hired to help with a deal overseas. In typical Daniel fashion, he pivoted the conversation, making Anna feel childish for suspecting anything. But the weight in her chest refused to fade. As the weeks passed, more odd incidents surfaced. Jewelry receipts in Daniel's briefcase that didn't match anything Anna had ever seen. Cryptic texts on his phone that he shielded from view. He started wearing cologne she'd never smelled before. Where once he would come home from an overseas trip, eager to hold her, now he walked in, phone pressed to his ear, barely acknowledging her presence. The baby in her belly kicked more vigorously each time a new wave of doubt battered her heart, as if the little life inside her sensed the tension. Late one night, Anna found herself pacing the bedroom. She touched the framed photo from their wedding, her reflection glimmering in the glass. She remembered how safe she felt in Daniel's arms, how he promised to protect her from life's harsh winds. Yet here she was, uncertain, anxious, desperate for answers. She was pregnant and exhausted, but a fierce resolve flickered within her. She would find the truth, no matter the cost. The decisive clue came from someone Anna least expected to help, Daniel's younger sister, Alicia. While Alicia wasn't particularly close with Anna, they had had their share of frosty interactions at family gatherings. She had a streak of empathy for the unborn baby. Alicia worried about Anna's health under so much stress. With eyebrows furrowed, Alicia confessed that she overheard Daniel talking about meeting Tessa at the Plaza Hotel bar in New York City. He was apparently quite insistent on secrecy. Alicia suspected it wasn't the first time they'd met there. Anna's heart hammered. The Plaza Hotel was famous for its exclusivity. The bar, adorned with classic decor and a refined ambiance, was a hotspot for discreet high society meetups. If Daniel was meeting Tessa there, it wasn't for a simple business chat. Anna realized she had to see it with her own eyes. She wouldn't rest until she had the unfiltered truth. She waited for the right moment. Daniel mentioned a business meeting scheduled for Friday evening. His manner was evasive, and he declined to give more details. That was enough for Anna. She planned meticulously, rehearsing scenarios. One moment she felt confident, steeled by righteous anger. The next, she was consumed by heartbreak, wishing she could bury her head in the sand. But in the end, the baby's well-being fueled her determination. She needed to know if this marriage, this life she was building, was a lie. Friday evening arrived, carrying a cold wind that rustled through the streets of Manhattan. Anna stepped out of a taxi a block away from the plaza. She wore a simple black maternity dress that clung to her swollen belly. She felt every bit the wronged heroine in a tragic play, but she forced herself to keep going. The doorman recognized her from past events. She offered a tight-lipped smile and prayed he wouldn't make a fuss. Luckily, he didn't. She glided into the lobby, heart pounding like thunder. Light from the grand chandeliers sparkled across the marble floors, reminiscent of a star-filled sky. She could barely hear the piano music in the background over the roar in her ears. Every footstep echoed like a final countdown to the confrontation. She found her way to the bar, a dimly lit space with plush seating and a sophisticated hush. She paused near a large palm plant, scanning the room. Then she saw them, Daniel and Tessa, at a small corner table, heads bent close, a bottle of expensive champagne half consumed. Tessa's laughter cut through the hush like a blade, confident and almost mocking. Her hand rested on Daniel's wrist. The spark in his eyes, so foreign to Anna these days, made Anna's stomach churn. Anna nearly turned around, wanting to escape the agony, but something in her refused to run. The baby stirred, giving her courage. She stepped forward, each step measured. She reached their table, her shadow falling over the pair, who looked up in surprise. Daniel's expression twisted into panic, while Tessa's red lips curled into a subtle, knowing smile. The moment felt suspended in time. Anna realized every fear, every suspicion had been warranted. She inhaled deeply and spoke, her voice trembling but resolute. "Daniel, I see your business meeting is going well." Daniel stood so abruptly that his chair screeched across the marble floor. Eyes from other guests darted toward the commotion. Tessa, with an unsettling composure, calmly sipped from her glass. Anna could see the condescension in her gaze, as though Tessa relished the scene. "Anna," Daniel began, hands raised in a gesture of surrender. Why are you here?" Anna tightened her grip on her purse strap. Her voice was cold and steady. "I think the better question is why you're here." She looked pointedly at Tessa, then at the half-empty champagne bottle. The golden bubbles sparkled like shattered trust, and with her, no less, The hush in the bar intensified. Daniel's face flushed. Tessa slowly stood, adjusting the folds of her glamorous red dress. She wore an emerald necklace that glimmered in the low light, a necklace that Anna recognized from a suspicious jewelry receipt she'd once found. "I don't think we need a scene," Tessa said lightly, looking around as if annoyed by the attention. Her confidence stoked Anna's anger. Tessa turned to Daniel with a smirk. "Maybe we should go somewhere else." "You're not going anywhere," Anna interjected, leveling her gaze at both of them. The baby shifted in her belly, an echo of the turmoil raging inside her. "Daniel, explain. Right here, right now." Daniel glanced around at the onlookers. He lowered his voice, attempting to steer them toward a more private corner. But Anna refused to move. She wanted the truth, wanted it in public, if that's what it took to finally shatter the lies. When Daniel didn't speak, Tessa decided to fill the silence. "Anna, darling," she purred, "I'm sure this is all very confusing for you in your condition. But Daniel and I have business that involves negotiations, consultations, that sort of thing. He just wanted a quieter place to talk. That's all." Anna bristled at Tessa's condescending tone. "It's quite a negotiation," she spat. "Necklaces, champagne, an intimate corner booth. Really, I'd love to hear the details of this lucrative contract." She turned again to Daniel. "Is this where all your late nights and secretive phone calls have gone? Is she your strategy to expand your empire?" Daniel pressed his lips into a grim line, cheeks burning with shame. He mumbled that they should leave the bar to discuss things privately, but Anna's fury was unstoppable. "Go on," she demanded, tears threatening to escape. "I want to hear you say it. Tell me that what I'm seeing is just business." Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came out. The tension drew audible gasps from nearby patrons. Anna's heart pounded with the velocity of betrayal. She realized in that moment how deeply she had hoped to be wrong. Even confronted with evidence, she'd clung to the desperate belief that there might be a misunderstanding. But Daniel's silence roared the truth. Her husband, the one person she trusted above all else, had shattered her world. Slowly, she felt the heat of her fury give way to an icy numbness. She placed a protective hand over her belly. It was a subtle gesture, but it spoke volumes. She might be broken, but she wasn't alone. Life thrived within her, and she would protect it at any cost. Tessa took a step back, eyes flicking to Daniel. "I think I'll leave you two to figure this out." "Daniel, call me when you—" "Don't you dare walk away," Anna snapped, surprising even herself with the force in her voice. "Not until I get an answer." She was tired of being brushed aside, tired of letting others dictate her life. If Tessa thought she could simply slip away, she was mistaken. Under the weight of her glare, Tessa paused. An uneasy silence stretched. Daniel opened and closed his fists at his sides, clearly struggling to maintain composure in front of the growing crowd. "Anna," Daniel whispered, his eyes pleading, "let's go upstairs. We can reserve a private suite here at the plaza, just to talk." "Please, not here. You've done plenty here already," Anna said, voice trembling with a mix of heartbreak and rage. "No. Whatever you have to say it now. In front of me, this crowd, and your mistress." A hush blanketed the room as Daniel inhaled a shaky breath. For a moment, guilt glimmered in his eyes. Then, as if a dam had burst, words began tumbling out. He admitted he'd been seeing Tessa for a few months, initially for business advice. One deal led to after meeting drinks, which led to something more. He hadn't meant for it to happen, but it did. He was ashamed. He claimed he still loved Anna and wanted to make things right, but he was in so deep, he didn't know how to pull himself out. Anna stood there, trembling, tears burning behind her eyes. She felt the eyes of the bar upon her, some pitying, some judging. She wanted to scream, to collapse, to rage at the unfairness of it all. Instead, she managed a choked whisper, "After meeting drinks." You had an affair while I carried our child. Daniel flinched. Tessa, to her credit, seemed momentarily uncomfortable. Or perhaps that was just Anna, imagining a flicker of shame. Tessa's mask of confidence never slipped far. I didn't expect things to go this far, Tessa offered, as though that was any consolation. Anna couldn't bear to stand there any longer. She turned on her heels, ignoring Daniel's pleas to wait. She hurried out of the bar, the clack of her heels echoing loudly in her ears. The baby shifted again, and Anna fought back the tears until she was safely out of sight. Only once she reached the lobby restroom did she let the sobs break free. Anna locked herself in a spacious stall and let her tears flow freely. She pressed her head against the cool tile wall, feeling a world of anguish crashing over her. The memory of Tessa's smirk, Daniel's faltering excuses, and the pitying glances of strangers all merged into a suffocating cloud. She looked down at her swollen belly. The baby was due in a few months. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, voice trembling. She had to protect her child, but how? Her entire life, her marriage, her trust, her sense of security was unraveling. She realized this was more than just an affair. It was a betrayal of vows, of a foundation they had promised to build together. Anger flared up once again, mingling with desperation. She wiped her tears and pulled her phone from her purse, ignoring the chaos of missed calls and frantic messages from Daniel. She dialed Alicia's number. "I caught him," Anna managed, voice unsteady. Alicia's gasp on the other end was all the confirmation she needed. Alicia offered to come pick her up, but Anna declined. She wanted no more humiliation for the night. No more public scenes. With a shaky determination, she left the restroom and headed for the elevator banks. If Daniel wanted to talk privately, she would give him the chance, if only to secure clarity for herself and for her unborn child. She pressed the call button, eyes catching her reflection in the mirrored wall, puffy eyes, smudged makeup, heartbreak etched into every line of her face. The elevator dinged open. She stepped inside, fists clenched. She would face Daniel, but on her terms. And she would find out just how deep his lies ran. On the 15th floor of the plaza, Daniel had hastily booked a suite. A trembling bellhop led Anna to a door, his eyes darting nervously between Anna's tear-streaked face and the plush hallway. He seemed to sense the tension and hurried away the moment he set down her suitcase of belongings that she had spontaneously grabbed from the penthouse before following Daniel. Anna paused outside the door, breath uneven. She knew Daniel was inside, waiting. She could almost feel his guilt seeping through the walls. But she had to do this. After a few seconds, she slid the keycard through the lock and entered. Daniel stood near the large bay window overlooking Fifth Avenue. City lights twinkled like fallen stars, a stark contrast to the turmoil within the room. He turned, eyes red-rimmed. He looked like he wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words. Anna shut the door softly behind her. She kept her back against it, as though needing physical support. "You wanted privacy," she said in a low tone. "Now we have it. Talk." Daniel cleared his throat. "Anna, I'm sorry. I never intended to hurt you. Things just spiraled. Tessa was helping me with a new tech expansion in Europe. We started spending time together, and it got complicated." "That's all?" Anna asked bitterly. "You got bored with your pregnant wife at home, so you decided to spend time with another woman?" Shame flickered in his eyes. "That's not how it started. But yes, that's where it ended up. And it was wrong. I hate myself for it." He stepped closer, but Anna held up a hand to stop him. "What about me? About us?" Her voice cracked. "Did you consider what this would do to me? Or to our child?" Daniel swallowed hard. "I was an idiot. I got caught up in the excitement, the secrecy. But it meant nothing, Anna. I swear. I care about you. I care about our baby." "Sure," Anna snapped. "When did you plan to mention the jewelry you bought her? Or the private dinners? Or the champagne in that bar?" Because it sure looked like it meant something. Or were you going to wait until one accidentally walked in on you again? He faltered, unable to produce a decent excuse. Anna felt a wave of nausea. The emotional stress, combined with her pregnancy, was overwhelming. She sank into an armchair, pressing a hand to her belly. Instantly, Daniel rushed to her side, concern flashing in his eyes. "Don't touch me," she hissed, though she was grateful to be seated. "You made your choices. Now deal with the consequences." For a moment, Daniel stood helpless, arms hovering as if wanting to support her. His voice was raw when he finally spoke. "I love you, Anna. This was a mistake, a terrible, regrettable mistake. But I need a chance to fix this. I can break it off with Tessa immediately. I'll do anything you want. Just, please don't leave me." Anna stared at him, disbelief roiling in her gut. "You think it's that easy? Just end it with Tessa, and everything goes back to normal?" She let out a hollow laugh. "You lied to me for months. You made me question my sanity when I suspected you. You forced me to catch you red-handed for you to even admit the truth. You think I can just forget that?" Daniel's face fell, and tears shimmered in his eyes. He started to speak, but Anna held up a finger. She needed to say her piece. "Marriage is built on trust, and you've broken that trust in the cruelest way possible while I'm carrying our child. Even if I wanted to forgive you, I'm not sure I could. It hurts too much." A strangled sob escaped Daniel. In all the time Anna had known him, she had never seen him so vulnerable. He was a billionaire, used to controlling outcomes and paying his way out of problems. But here, in this suite, with the city lights behind him, he was just a man facing the wreckage of his actions. Anna felt the faint stirring of pity, but overshadowing that was rage, heartbreak, and a fierce maternal instinct to shield her unborn baby from further pain. "I need time," she whispered, voice heavy with exhaustion. "I need space to think. So many months you were with her. I don't know how to process that. I don't even know if I can." Daniel reached out a trembling hand. "I'll give you whatever you need. Please, let me make this right. I'll cut Tessa out. I'll see a counselor. His words tapered off as Anna shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. "It might be too late for that," she said softly, then rose from the chair. Before Daniel could protest, she walked toward the door. "I'm going home. Alone." He called out her name, but Anna walked down the corridor without looking back, stepping into an elevator that felt like a confessional booth. As the door slid shut, she wasn't sure if she was leaving just the suite or the life she and Daniel had built, because it was painfully clear that nothing would ever be the same again. Anna spent the night at their penthouse guest room, locking the door to keep Daniel out. She wanted distance, but ironically, her mind was racing through every detail of the confrontation, refusing to let her rest. Her phone buzzed relentlessly with messages from Daniel. Apologies, promises, pleas. She stared at them through bleary eyes, unsure if the man she once adored existed anymore. The next morning, Alicia arrived unannounced, letting herself in with the spare key. Anna was still in her nightgown, dark circles under her eyes. Alicia immediately enveloped her in a hug. It was the first act of genuine kindness Anna had felt in what seemed like ages, and it nearly broke her resolve. She wept into Alicia's shoulder, words tumbling out about how the affair had started, how Tessa was intimately involved in Daniel's new business projects, and how everything felt irreparably shattered. Alicia stroked her hair and listened patiently. "I had a bad feeling," Alicia murmured. "Daniel's been so secretive, even with me. I wish I'd told you sooner. I'm sorry." Anna pulled away, wiping her tears. "It's not your fault. Daniel made his choice. I don't know how to handle it." Alicia hesitated, then admitted, "There's more you should know. I didn't mention it because I wasn't sure, but I suspect Tessa isn't just a random consultant. She's been linked to other powerful men, and word is she uses her relationships to gain control in business deals. There are rumors that she blackmails them. Anna's stomach lurched. Blackmail? You think, Daniel? Alicia sighed. I don't know, but Tessa's not the type to let a billionaire slip through her fingers without some gain, especially if it ends badly. This revelation weighed on Anna like a boulder. The baby kicked, as if sensing her tension. She realized that the nightmare might stretch beyond personal betrayal into scandal, threats, public humiliation. Could Tessa have planned all this, seeing Daniel as a ticket to wealth and power? At that moment, Daniel knocked softly on the guest room door. Anna? Alicia? Can I come in? Anna looked to Alicia, who gave a subtle nod. Anna cracked open the door. Daniel stood there, looking disheveled, eyes rimmed with red. He glanced at Alicia but focused on Anna. We need to talk. It's urgent. He inhaled sharply. I got word this morning that Tessa's threatening to leak details of our relationship to the media unless I pay her a large sum. She also hinted at some damaging files, some corporate deals that she claims could ruin my reputation. I swear I didn't know about any blackmail. She's never asked for money until now, but apparently she's recorded conversations, has photos. Anna, if this gets out, it could ruin everything. Anna's head spun. Alicia shot her a pointed look. This was exactly what she'd feared. Anna braced herself, swallowing the bitter taste of betrayal. Her voice was icy. So now you want my help? After humiliating me in front of half of New York, Daniel wiped a hand over his face. I deserve that. But yes, I need your help. I can't handle this alone. And his gaze flickered to Anna's stomach. I want to make sure our child doesn't grow up with a father in disgrace. I know you might not want to be with me anymore, but please, at least help me face this problem. A swirl of conflict tore through Anna. Part of her wanted to say no, to let Daniel stew in the mess he created. But she knew the scandal would drag her down as well and possibly harm the baby. Reluctantly, she nodded. We'll talk, but don't expect forgiveness. Seated around the living room table, Anna, Alicia, and Daniel pored over the text messages Tessa had sent. The demands were explicit. A $5 million payment transferred discreetly to an offshore account in exchange for her silence. She threatened to leak incriminating pictures and audio to tabloids if Daniel refused. There was a mention of a tech competitor who would love to see Daniel's empire crumble. It was a twisted labyrinth of threats, secrets, and potential ruin. Anna felt sick reading Tessa's smug words. She's basically using your affair as leverage to blackmail you, she said, voice shaking. You gave her everything she needed, Daniel. How could you be so careless? He bowed his head. I was blinded by lust, by stupidity. I never thought she'd do this. Well, she did, Alicia snapped. So what's the plan? Pay her? Go to the police? Try to reason with her? Daniel stared at the text messages, despair etched into his features. Paying her might only encourage more demands. Going to the police would make this public and a huge scandal. If she really has incriminating material about my business deals, it could trigger an investigation. My investors would pull out. The board would lose faith. We could lose billions. Anna's frustration peaked. So your primary concern is your business. He lifted his eyes, desperation and regret mingling. No, I'm worried about us, about you and the baby. I know I messed up, but I still have responsibilities to everyone who works at my companies, to our employees and shareholders. If Tessa's threats are real, a scandal of that magnitude could destroy countless livelihoods. I need to handle this carefully. Anna exhaled heavily, forcing herself to remain calm. Fine. So what do we do? They brainstormed. Alicia suggested contacting a top-notch security firm. Anna recommended gathering any evidence they had. that could discredit Tessa. Daniel hesitated, worrying that might spur Tessa to release her dirt sooner. Eventually, they decided to meet Tessa on neutral ground, a private law office under the guidance of Daniel's legal counsel, to see if they could negotiate a resolution without succumbing to blackmail or inciting further wrath. Anna felt her heart pounding as they arranged the meeting for the next day. Part of her still reeled from the personal betrayal. Now she was thrown into corporate intrigue that could overshadow everything else. She realized with dismay that Tessa hadn't just hurt her marriage, she had inserted herself into the very framework of Daniel's world, and by extension, Anna's world too. The next day, Anna arrived at the high-rise law firm with Alicia and Daniel. A team of attorneys awaited them in a gleaming conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Tessa was scheduled to appear in an hour. The tension was palpable. Anna sat at the far end of the long mahogany table, hands clasped over her belly. She wished she were anywhere else. She scanned the array of serious suits, Daniel's top corporate lawyer, a crisis manager who specialized in high-profile scandals, and a private investigator discreetly situated in a corner. Everyone murmured in hushed voices, analyzing possible outcomes. The clock ticked ominously until the moment Tessa swept in, wearing a perfectly tailored black suit and exuding an air of supreme confidence. She didn't come alone. Her own attorney, a sharp-faced woman with a briefcase, followed close behind. Tessa's eyes locked onto Daniel, then darted to Anna. A flicker of something akin to contempt passed over her features. "Shall we sit?" Tessa said coolly, gesturing to the table. Her attorney placed a stack of documents before them. "We can keep this simple. I have what I have. You have the funds you have. Let's not complicate matters." Anna's anger burned. She wanted to scream at Tessa for daring to speak so casually after everything she'd done. But she kept silent, letting Daniel's lawyers take the lead. They questioned the validity of Tessa's supposed evidence, demanded proof. Tessa smirked and played an audio snippet on her phone. Daniel's voice discussing sensitive information about an upcoming merger, coupled with flirtatious banter. It was enough to make Anna's stomach churn, and enough to prove Tessa did have leverage. The negotiation spiraled into a tense standoff. Tessa demanded immediate payment. Daniel's team insisted on partial disbursement only after Tessa signed a non-disclosure agreement and handed over all evidence. Tessa's lawyer coolly retorted that a single payment was non-negotiable, or the media would receive a juicy scandal. Anna fought the urge to slam her fist on the table. Instead, she said quietly, "Tessa, why are you doing this? You already had Daniel. You had the affair. Isn't that what you wanted?" Tessa glanced at Anna, a faint smirk playing on her lips. "What I want is to be compensated for my time and expertise. This is business, Anna. Don't take it so personally. Daniel and I had a relationship, yes, but that's not the real story here. The real story is the power I hold, power you were never going to have." Daniel clenched his jaw, about to respond, but Anna's gentle but firm voice cut him off. "You talk about power as though it's everything, but real power isn't about money or blackmail. It's about respect, loyalty, empathy, things you clearly know nothing about." Tessa's eyes flickered with disdain, but she stayed silent. Her lawyer, however, pressed the matter, returning to the demands. Hours ticked by. Negotiations punctuated by tense silences, phone calls, half-hearted compromises. In the end, no agreement was reached. Tessa refused to budge on her single-payment ultimatum. Daniel's lawyers refused to release such a vast sum without guaranteed destruction of all evidence. As Tessa rose to leave, she shot a parting remark, chilling and succinct. "You have 48 hours to decide, Daniel. After that, the tapes go public. And trust me, once they do, your entire world will crumble." Then she swept out, leaving the conference room in a state of shock. Night fell, and the law office cleared out. Daniel, Alicia, and Anna remained, quietly discussing next steps with the crisis manager, a man named Robert Gaines. He laid out the stark reality. If Tessa released the incriminating evidence, Daniel's personal and professional reputation would be in shambles. Investors would flee, lawsuits could ensue, and the scandal would ripple into Anna's life, their unborn child's future, and every philanthropic endeavor the Calhoun name was tied to. Alicia fumed, pacing back and forth. "She's bluffing." "She must be bluffing," she insisted, though her tone lacked conviction. Daniel ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I'm not sure. Even if half of it is bluff, the other half is still damaging." Anna rubbed her temples, exhaustion gripping her. "What do we do, Robert?" Robert adjusted his tie, the strain of the day etched on his face. "My recommendation is to gather any counter-evidence or to secure an injunction against Tessa, though that process could take time. Alternatively, if you believe Tessa truly won't budge, paying her might be your quickest path out, though ethically. I never recommend capitulating to blackmail." Anna frowned. The idea of simply handing over millions to the woman who wrecked her marriage made her stomach churn. But the stakes were terrifying. She could already imagine tabloids running front-page headlines, "Billionaire's affair exposed," "Pregnant wife betrayed." She imagined the paparazzi hounding her. The baby. The thought filled her with dread. She turned to Daniel, her voice weary. "This isn't just about you anymore. It's about our child. If Tessa goes public, that scandal will follow our baby forever." Daniel's face tightened. "I know, and that's what scares me most." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "We have 48 hours. Let's see if we can find a way to discredit her. If we can prove she's blackmailed others, or if her evidence is doctored, we might weaken her position." "Robert, can you get your investigator on that?" Robert nodded. "I'll start immediately." "Good," Daniel said. "And if it fails, we'll decide if paying her is a necessary evil." Anna and Alicia exchanged worried looks. This was not a simple negotiation, not a typical business deal. A wave of despair washed over Anna. She recalled the day she said "I do" to Daniel, believing in a bright future. Now, just a short time later, she was haggling with lawyers and crisis managers, dealing with the fallout of an affair she never dreamed possible. Yet, in the darkest corner of her heart, Anna felt a flicker of resolve. She wasn't just a victim. She was a mother. And for the sake of her child, she would find a way to navigate this hellish predicament, even if it meant facing unimaginable confrontations. Over the next day, Robert's investigator unearthed a trove of rumors tying Tessa to past blackmail attempts. However, most of those cases seemed carefully buried or settled out of court. No one wanted to go on record against her, likely fearing further exposure. Desperate, Anna took a different approach. She reached out to a source from her past, an old friend named Cora, who now worked as a journalist for the New York Times. Cora was known for her investigative tenacity. They met secretly at a small cafe in Midtown, far from the glitz of Daniel's usual haunts. Sitting across from Cora in a quiet booth, Anna explained the situation. She recounted Tessa's threats, the affair, the blackmail. She hadn't intended to share so many personal details, but she trusted Cora's discretion. Cora listened gravely, jotting notes in a small leather notebook. "This Tessa sounds like a professional extortionist," Cora said. "I might be able to tap some sources, see if there's anything I can dig up that's not publicly known. If I find something, it might help you turn the tables." Anna breathed a shaky sigh of relief. "Thank you. Just, please keep my identity under wraps. I don't want a bigger scandal." Cora reached across the table, squeezing Anna's hand gently. "I promise, I'll do what I can. Parting ways, Anna felt marginally hopeful. But as the hours ticked closer to Tessa's 48-hour deadline, anxiety gnawed at her. Daniel's entire team was on high alert. Alicia hovered near Anna like a protective sister, while Daniel immersed himself in strategy meetings. Late that evening, Cora called Anna. Her voice was tense. "Anna, I dug around. It seems Tessa has ties to a known corporate saboteur. She's done this routine before: lure wealthy men, gather secrets, threaten them, or feed info to business rivals for profit." A chill coursed through Anna. "So it's definitely bigger than just an affair." "Absolutely," Cora confirmed. "She's systematically targeted men who oversee lucrative deals. There's a rumor that she's connected to Winston Mackey, the head of a rival tech conglomerate. If that's true, she might be funneling your husband's secrets directly to him, or using them to manipulate Daniel into making bad decisions that favor Mackey's interests." Anna's mind whirled. Winston Mackey was a major competitor in Daniel's sphere. If Tessa was working with him, the stakes were even higher. Daniel's empire might not just suffer from scandal, it could be systematically dismantled. "Thank you, Cora," Anna managed. "This is huge." "Use it wisely," Cora advised, "and carefully." Armed with Cora's information, Daniel's crisis team launched into overdrive. If Tessa was feeding secrets to Winston Mackey, that constituted industrial espionage. They could threaten Tessa with a lawsuit or even criminal charges if she was found complicit. But they needed proof, and time was running out. The atmosphere in the penthouse felt electric with tension. Anna's phone pinged with a text message from Tessa, a mocking reminder of the deadline. Now just 12 hours away, Alicia prowled the hallways, chewing her nails and cursing under her breath. Daniel retreated to his study with phone calls, trying to gather any intel on Mackey's potential involvement. Just before midnight, Robert, the crisis manager, announced they had enough circumstantial evidence to confront Tessa. While not a smoking gun, it might be enough to scare her into backing down, or at least negotiating more favorably. Anna's stomach twisted with dread and morning sickness. She wished none of this was happening. She wished she could be a normal, expectant mother, worried about baby clothes and nursery colors, not blackmail and corporate sabotage. But fate had dealt her this hand, and she resolved to see it through. Strangely, Tessa insisted on meeting again at the Plaza Hotel bar. It was as if she reveled in the very place where Anna caught them. The irony wasn't lost on Anna. But Daniel's team agreed, hoping the public space would discourage Tessa from dramatic outbursts. When Anna arrived, her heart thundered with painful familiarity. The same chandeliers twinkled overhead, the same plush seating, but everything felt colder, sharper. She found Tessa sipping a martini in the corner booth, completely at ease. Her lawyer was absent this time, a power move to appear more personal, no doubt. Daniel, Robert, and Alicia joined Anna. Tessa raised an eyebrow, glancing over the group. "I take it you've decided to pay, then?" Daniel slid into a seat across from her. "Actually, we have some new information. We know you've been in contact with Winston Mackey. Sharing corporate secrets is corporate espionage. We have enough to file charges if you release anything you claim to have. And those charges could put you away for a long time." Tessa's smirk wavered, only slightly, but Anna caught it. "I don't know what you're talking about," Tessa replied, tossing her hair dismissively. Yet a flicker of uncertainty danced in her eyes. Robert pressed a folder to the table. Emails, phone logs, bank transfers. "You've been in discussions with a shell company that leads directly back to Mackey. If you expose any private data about Calhoun Industries, we'll have proof you did so with criminal intent." Tessa's eyes narrowed. "So what's this? A bluff? Try us." Alicia shot back, her voice ice cold. Anna watched Tessa's face carefully. Beneath that veneer of confidence, Anna spotted fear. The blackmail scheme was built on her advantage, an advantage that had now evaporated. She had power only if Daniel was scared, but now he had evidence that could ruin her. For a moment, Tessa seemed to calculate her next move. Then, with a sigh, she leaned back, swirling her martini. Fine. You've done your homework, so let's talk real numbers. Daniel blinked. Numbers? We just told you we can take this to court if you try anything. Tessa chuckled humorlessly. And you'll cause a scandal in the process, right? You think the press won't cover a corporate espionage suit? Your dirty laundry will be aired out anyway. My guess is you still want this buried. So how about a reduced fee for my silence? 2 million, not 5. I'll sign whatever agreement you want, and we all walk away unscathed. Anna felt her blood boil. Tessa was incorrigible, shifting tactics the moment she lost leverage. She was still demanding a fortune for secrecy. Robert coughed, turning to Daniel. This was the moment of decision. Fight and risk everything in a messy trial, or pay and end it quietly. Daniel looked at Anna, helplessness etched in his eyes. She knew what this meant. If Tessa agreed to keep silent, the scandal might be contained. The baby could be protected from a media circus, but it also meant letting Tessa win to some extent. Anna's heart pounded with conflicting emotions. She didn't want Tessa to profit from her betrayal, yet the baby's future weighed heavily. Finally, Daniel spoke, voice measured. 2 million in exchange for all copies of the evidence, the NDA, and the guarantee of total silence. If you so much as utter my name to the press, we release our evidence of your espionage attempts. Understood? Tessa downed the last of her martini. Understood. I'll have my lawyer draw up the papers. Anna clenched her fists, holding back a storm of emotions. She hated that Tessa was getting away with so much, but she needed to protect herself, her child, and perhaps even Daniel's employees, who depended on his company's stability. The moral compromise stung like a fresh wound. After the confrontation, Tessa left with a triumphant smirk, but not without handing over a flash drive. She claimed it held everything: photos, audio, videos. Robert promised to verify it meticulously, ensuring Tessa wasn't holding back additional copies. Anna stood with Daniel near the bar's entrance, feeling drained and hollow. Alicia gave them space, stepping aside to make a phone call. The bartender discreetly avoided eye contact. Sensing the gravity, Daniel let out a trembling breath. I'm sorry it came to this. Paying her, it feels wrong. Anna nodded wearily. It is wrong, but we do what we have to, I suppose. Silence fell. Anna placed a hand on her belly, her thoughts swirling. She was relieved the immediate threat was contained, but heartbreak remained. The affair, Tessa's cruelty, the blackmail, it all left a permanent scar. Daniel began, hesitating. I want you to know none of this was worth it. If I could turn back time, I'd give anything to fix what I broke between us. Anna stared at the chandelier overhead. For a moment, she pictured the wedding day again, the promised forever. Then Tessa's face intruded, mocking her naivete. Daniel, she said softly, this doesn't magically erase what happened. Even if Tessa vanishes, the pain remains. I don't know if I can forgive you. He bowed his head. I understand. A long pause lingered. Anna finally mustered a flicker of compassion. What happens to us now? He looked at her with desperate hope. We try therapy. We rebuild trust, if you'll let me. I'm not asking for miracles, just a chance to prove. I'm not the man Tessa made me out to be. Please. Anna's throat constricted. She didn't answer immediately. She wanted to believe there was a path forward, especially for their child, but the wounds were too raw. I need time, she whispered. We'll see. Life settled into an uneasy routine. The immediate crisis with Tessa was resolved. Lawyers finalized the NDA and wire transfer. Robert's team verified the flash drive's contents before placing them in secure storage. For now, Tessa was gone, but the emotional wreckage remained. As the weeks passed, Anna tried to distance herself from the heartbreak. She attended prenatal checkups, focusing on the growing life inside her. Occasionally, Daniel accompanied her, offering quiet support, but Anna kept him at arm's length. Then, in a twist of fate that felt like cosmic retribution, Daniel's businesses took a series of hits unrelated to Tessa. A global economic downturn battered stock prices. A key investor withdrew from a major project at the last minute. Lawsuits unrelated to the scandal emerged, claiming patent infringements in one of Calhoun Industries' tech subsidiaries. It was a perfect storm, hitting Daniel from all sides. Anna watched as Daniel scrambled to keep the company afloat. Board members questioned his leadership. Rumors of the near scandal with Tessa spread quietly among a few insiders, eroding confidence further. Some whispered that Daniel had lost his edge, that he'd become too distracted by personal drama to steer the empire effectively. Despite the tension between them, Anna felt a pang of sympathy. She saw him come home late, eyes shadowed with exhaustion, the once confident swagger gone. But part of her also recognized this as a form of karma. He had betrayed his marriage, and now fate was punishing him in ways neither of them could have foreseen. One evening, as Daniel sat in his home office, staring at financial spreadsheets with despair, Anna entered quietly. She'd brought tea, a small gesture of peace. He glanced up, surprised. "Hey," he said, voice husky from sleepless nights. She offered a faint smile, placing the cup on his desk. "Chamomile. Thought you might need something calming." He sighed gratefully, taking a sip. "Thanks." Anna hesitated, unsure how to proceed. "I heard about the layoffs. That must be tough." He nodded, eyes clouded with guilt. "It is. I hate letting people go. But if we don't cut costs, the company could collapse entirely." A wave of compassion swept over Anna. Despite everything, she remembered the side of Daniel who cared about people, who believed in building a legacy that helped others. "Maybe there's another way," she offered gently. "I know we're not in the best place, but if you want someone to brainstorm with, I'm here." Daniel's gaze softened, gratitude flickering in his tired eyes. "I'd like that. I miss talking with you about anything really." Something in Anna's chest tightened. She missed it too. Days turned into hours of stiff politeness, overshadowed by the betrayal. Yet a thread of connection lingered. She pulled a chair closer, glancing over the reports. "Let's see if we can find a strategy that minimizes job losses. Maybe restructure some departments, explore new partnerships." They delved into discussions, analyzing numbers and possible solutions. It was oddly reminiscent of their early days, when they'd talk excitedly about Daniel's business ideas. But now, the air was heavy with unspoken regret. At midnight, they realized they'd spent hours together, forging a tentative truce. Anna rubbed her belly, feeling the baby shift. Daniel watched with a mix of awe and sorrow. He reached a hand out, then paused, unsure if he was allowed to rest it on her stomach. Anna swallowed hard, then nodded. As Daniel's palm met the gentle curve of her pregnancy, the baby kicked. They both smiled, an instinctive, genuine moment of shared wonder. For a fleeting second, the distance between them shrank, replaced by a quiet sense of possibility. In the following weeks, Anna continued to help Daniel with strategies to stabilize the company. She wasn't a business prodigy, but her intuition and attention to detail offered fresh perspectives that Daniel's executives appreciated. Together, they implemented cost-saving measures without severe layoffs, opting for temporary pay cuts at the executive level instead. Morale improved. Investors took note. Slowly the ship began to right itself. Meanwhile, Anna's due date inched closer. She spent hours reading about childbirth, attending prenatal classes, and preparing the nursery. Daniel accompanied her on more appointments, carefully treading the fragile line between them. Neither had declared a final decision on the marriage. Anna's hurt was still there, but so was a cautious sense of rebuilding. Alicia noticed the shift, dropping by with baby gifts and supportive words. Even Robert, the crisis manager, commented on how the atmosphere around Daniel had improved. Tessa remained silent, likely well settled with her 2 million. The ghost of her betrayal lingered, but it didn't overshadow daily life as it once had. Still, Anna wrestled with her conflicted emotions. She found Daniel's efforts to redeem himself sincere. He cut off all questionable social ties, gave her full access to his communications, and started therapy sessions, both individual and with Anna, when she was willing. But trust was a delicate plant, and the wound was deep. Late one night, as thunder rumbled across the city skyline, Anna felt the first sharp pangs of labor. She was in bed, trying to sleep, when a contraction ripped through her abdomen. She gasped, panic racing up her spine. Quickly, she shook Daniel awake. His eyes flew open, instantly alert. "Is it time?" She nodded, breath hitching with pain. I think so." A rush of adrenaline hit them both. They grabbed the hospital bag, called Alicia, and sped through the rain-slicked streets to Mount Sinai Hospital. Nurses whisked Anna into a birthing suite, hooking her up to monitors. The baby's heartbeat filled the room with a rapid, comforting rhythm. Daniel stood by her side, holding her hand. She gritted her teeth through contractions, sweat beading her forehead. Fear mingled with excitement. This was the day they'd meet their child, a new life born from their turbulent union. Hours blurred into a haze of pain, pushing, tears. Daniel whispered encouragement, apologizing for every misstep, promising to be a better man, a better father. Anna focused on one singular goal: bring their baby safely into the world. Despite the heartbreak, the betrayal, in that moment, she was grateful Daniel was there. At dawn, a shrill cry filled the room. Their son emerged, small and wrinkled and perfect. The nurse placed him on Anna's chest, and she burst into tears, overwhelmed by love so powerful. It erased every other thought. Daniel, tears streaming down his face, leaned in to kiss the baby's tiny forehead. They named him Benjamin, a name Anna had loved since childhood. Holding Benjamin, Anna felt the universe shift, as if everything else paled in comparison. She caught Daniel's gaze, and for a moment, forgiveness seemed possible. Not guaranteed, but attainable someday. In the days after Benjamin's birth, Anna and Daniel remained at the hospital, absorbing the joys and challenges of new parenthood. Their families visited, showering them with love and congratulations. Alicia was particularly overjoyed, snapping endless photos of her nephew. Anna noticed a transformation in Daniel. He spent hours cradling Benjamin, talking softly to him about the world, about values and dreams. It was a side of him Anna hadn't seen in a long time: gentle, vulnerable, real. While the pain of betrayal still lingered, the sight of Daniel as a doting father softened something in her heart. When they finally brought Benjamin home, Anna stepped into the nursery with awe. It was a tranquil space, soft pastel walls, a crib adorned with plush animals, a glider by the window overlooking the city. She placed Benjamin in the crib, watching as he dozed off, oblivious to the storms that had raged before his arrival. Daniel hovered in the doorway, hesitant. "Anna?" She turned, tired but content. "Yes?" He swallowed hard. "I just wanted to say I'm grateful for letting me be here, for giving me a chance to show up for our son. I know it doesn't erase what I did, but I want you to know how deeply sorry I am." Anna felt emotion welling up. "I appreciate that, I do." She glanced at Benjamin's sleeping form. "He deserves both of us at our best." Daniel nodded, stepping into the room. He tentatively wrapped an arm around Anna's shoulder. She didn't pull away. Together, they watched their newborn son breathe in gentle little sighs. The future was uncertain, but in that shared moment of parenthood, they found a fragile promise of hope. Time passed. Benjamin grew, and so did the complexities of Anna and Daniel's relationship. Therapy sessions became a weekly routine. Anna unpacked the betrayal, Daniel confronted his flaws, and they tentatively rebuilt trust. It wasn't linear. There were arguments, setbacks, nights Anna slept in the guest room. But there were also breakthroughs, moments of genuine closeness that hinted at a stronger bond than before. Professionally, Daniel fought tooth and nail to restore Calhoun Industries. Bit by bit, the company stabilized, regaining investor confidence. Reports praised Daniel's resilience, attributing it to his renewed focus. Only Anna and a few others knew the personal cost behind that focus. Then came the final twist of karma, Tessa's downfall. News broke that she'd attempted a similar blackmail on Winston Mackey himself, trying to extort money by threatening to leak false secrets about Mackey's company. But Mackey had set a trap, collaborating with law enforcement. Tessa was arrested on charges of attempted extortion and fraud. The tabloids devoured the scandal, though they never mentioned Daniel or Anna thanks to the ironclad NDA. When Anna heard the news, she felt a weight lift. Tessa was finally facing the consequences of her actions. The chapter of fear was truly closing. A sense of poetic justice shimmered, as though the universe had balanced itself. By the time Benjamin celebrated his first birthday, Anna and Daniel found themselves in a more peaceful place. The affair and blackmail remained part of their history, an unerasable scar, but they had navigated through it together. Anna had witnessed Daniel's genuine remorse, his willingness to be better, and Daniel had discovered that true power, indeed, came from honesty, vulnerability, and respect. They threw a small birthday party at the penthouse, just family and close friends. Benjamin squealed with delight at the sight of balloons and cake, blissfully unaware of the drama that once threatened to tear his family apart. Anna caught Daniel's eye across the room, and he gave her a soft smile. She smiled back, a signal that while forgiveness wasn't absolute, love still had room to grow. Later that night, once everyone had gone and Benjamin was asleep, they stood on the balcony together, gazing at the shimmering cityscape. Daniel slipped a hand around her waist. "We've come a long way." Anna leaned into him, exhaling softly. "Yes, we have." They shared a quiet moment, each knowing the future remained unwritten. But for the first time in a long while, that uncertainty felt like possibility rather than dread. This story reminds us that trust can be torn apart in an instant and takes far longer to mend. Secrets, temptations, and betrayals don't just threaten our happiness, they challenge our very identity and the foundations we've built with those we love. When deception collides with loyalty, when ambition eclipses compassion, the fallout tests even the strongest bonds. Yet, amid the wreckage, hope can still find its way. Confronting our darkest mistakes, taking responsibility, and refusing to give in to blackmail or fear can lead to a path of redemption.